So Guardian games just got released, and last year, 2023, Titans won, but it was very close with Hunters and Warlocks not too far behind. This year I want Titans to win again, so I am committed to dropping the best Titan builds to help my Titans farm Guardian game activities. So if you're a Titan main and you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe because I will be dropping a lot of Titan builds in the upcoming following weeks. The build that I have today combines Paragon Greaves with a Solar Titan, so we have infinite health regen, a one-shot ability, and a way to stun 2 champions in just one build. In all honesty, ability spam build has always been my favorite, and the only downside to this build is that we don't have a debuff. But honestly, we don't even need a debuff with all the damage we're doing with our one-shot ability. But let's break the build down. The exotic of choice today that we will be rocking on our Solar Titan will be the Paragon Greaves. Now with the Paragon Greaves, we're going to have a 225% damage buff while airborne. Now the Paragon Greaves strike, you're going to have to charge it up a little bit while you're in the air. Just make sure you see that icon in the bottom left saying that you fully charged your shoulder charge, or in this case our hammer strike. Now once that buff is active, we're going to deal an increased 225% damage, and if you combine that with Radiant, you're dealing even more damage. But like I said in the beginning, we don't have a debuff to deal an increased amount of damage. But that's the only exotic we're rocking on our Titan, which is the Paragon Greaves. The next thing we need to dive into is our subclass setup to maximize our damage output and stay alive in difficult content, or just stay alive in the Guardian game activities that just came out. So for our Titan subclass, our super is completely up to you. I swap between Burning Maul and Hammer of Soul depending on the content, but I usually just stick with Hammer of Soul. We're using Hammer Strike. Hammer Strike is our shoulder charge, and once we do hit enemies, if they're already scorched, they will become ignite. And with the new updates, once you deal damage with your Hammer Strike, it's going to be fully refunded to you. So you're able to just spam this over and over and over again with your increased 225% damage. The next thing we do have is our Thermite Grenade. We're using our Thermite Grenade to easily scorch targets that are far away. You can always swap this for a Healing Grenade or even a Fusion Grenade if you feel like the Thermite Grenade isn't dealing enough damage. The next thing we're going to jump into is our aspects. The first thing we do have is Roaring Flames, which pairs well with our Thermite Grenade, so we're able to easily stack our Roaring Flames to ×3, so our shoulder charge will deal even more damage. So the next aspect we have is how we're able to have infinite health regen with Soul Invictus. Soul Invictus makes it so that once we do kill an enemy with any of our abilities, they're going to spawn a sunspot. And passing through that sunspot, whether it be you or any of your teammates, will grant you restoration. This is how we have our infinite health regen. So not only are you a tank, but you're also able to deal lots amount of damage. And that's everything that a Titan is being able to tank a whole bunch of damage and pump out just as much damage. Now our aspects, I swap on my aspects quite a bit, but the only thing I want to keep in mind is I want to be able to keep my health regen up and scorch targets so they're able to ignite quicker, and that's how we're able to stun one of those champions, is by scorching a lot of targets and making them ignite. That's how we stun unstoppable champions. For the first fragment we have is Ember of Mercy. The reason we're using Ember of Mercy is we gain 10 resilience, and when we pick up a fire sprite, it grants us restoration. This is so when you're in a sticky situation and your sunspots already ran out, we're able to just grab our fire sprite and gain restoration again, so we can continuously heal ourselves. We're going to be combining Ember of Mercy with Ember of Searing, so once we defeat scorched targets, it will create a fire sprite. So you have 2 different ways to proc your health regen, either by picking up a fire sprite or by going through a solar sunspot. This also grants us a nice 10 recovery. The next fragment we do have is Ember of Empyrean, so our solar weapon or ability finder blows extend the duration of restoration and radiant. Now we're proccing restoration either by picking up a fire sprite or using our sunspot. The way we will be proccing radiant is by using our seasonal artifact gloves, which I haven't talked about yet, but we'll jump into. That's how we're proccing radiant in this build. And the last thing we do have is Ember of Blistering. So once we defeat target with solar ignitions, we're going to be refunded our grenade energy. So we're going to have a way to regen our grenade energy by just using Ember of Blistering, since we're scorching everything in our path and we're hammer striking everything in one-shot and champions in this build. The weapons of choice are completely up to you. Since we don't have a debuff in this build, sometimes I like to swap in Tractor Cannon just to give myself a debuff when I'm running solo, but if you're not running solo, then don't worry about the debuff. And we will need main important things you want to keep in mind for your seasonal artifacts is make sure you have the perk Flint Striker so you're able to grant yourself radiant with a solar weapon, and Kindling Trigger. Those are the only two perks that are really mandatory for this build to work. Flint Striker makes it so that you are proccing your radiant, and once we proc our radiant, we're able to extend it because of the fragments we're using. And Kindling Trigger makes it so that once we do have radiant, we're gonna scorch targets that aren't already scorched by just using a solar weapon. So everything will become scorched, and once we do scorch all those targets, it will refund our grenade energy. So the solar weapons I am using, or my favorite one to use, is Azalu's Bane, but you can always swap this in and out for, Sunshot or even an Igneous Hammer. And the king of PvE right now, which is the Polaris Lance, works very well in this build. Now the stats you want to build into will be 100 resilience and 100 discipline. The third stat, if you have the points left over, I would say build it into recovery just so you can have a little bit more recovery. You could also build into strength, but since we are able to refund our melee infinitely, there's no real reason to build into strength. And the mods that I'm using, nothing has really changed from my usual mod setup, and that's just going to be a way to generate my orbs of power and then a way to use my orbs of power. Everything else I use in my build is always standard, but we're generating orbs of power through Fireball on our gauntlets, and then we're using those orbs of power with Special Finisher to generate special ammo if we are lacking. Everything else I use in my build is always standard, and that's it. Titans, I'm not giving you a build that can take on the majority of content in Destiny 2, and if you aren't a Titan main, then consider switching sides to the best class on Destiny 2 right now. And that's all I have for you guys today. If you guys like the video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video, which will be a Titan video, by the way.